Buenos días a todos. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, I think we're good. Well, thank you everyone for making the time to come join us for this panel to learn a little bit more about vertical video. I think this panel is going to be as educative for me as maybe for anybody else, or maybe more, because I think the importance of vertical video cannot be denied. Can we do a quick show of hands? How many people have spent endless hours and half an hours just scrolling through their phone, doing absolute nonsense and not wondering where the time has disappeared? Everybody. How many of you in your companies, in your line of work, are creating content for vertical video? Actually, a decent number, yeah, more or less. So everybody understands the importance of why vertical is important. While you're consuming, you can see the importance of creating as well. I've got today Robbie Spargo from Little Dot Sports, who will tell us more about why we should be spending time on this topic. Welcome, Robbie.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. It's yeah, great to be here, and hopefully the things that we show today are going to be as kind of practical and useful as possible. So even have a few slides which hopefully will help you all in your day-to-day work and also help you understand the space even further.
Yeah, we were just talking, so we've just started creating a bit of vertical video. I was just telling Robbie, my team has been pushing for us to create like 60-second or 90-second clips. And what we can do better, so like I said, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to improve ourselves as well, our content creation. So Robbie, I know you have some slides to take us through, so why don't you kick us off, and I'll tee you up with, we'll start at the beginning. I think over the course of this, the next 35 minutes or so, 33 minutes or so, we're going to talk about what and why of vertical video. So I think that's fairly simple, but Robbie has some great slides to present data behind the why and how consumer trends are moving to this format. Then we're going to talk about the platforms themselves, so how to differentiate between Reels, between YouTube, TikTok, etc. And then we're going to go a bit more forward-looking. So that's a little brief of what we're going to cover in this panel. So Robbie, why don't you start us off? What is a vertical video strategy? What does it actually look like, and why is it important?
Sure. So yeah, if you could flick the slides on the screen.
I think you have the clicker.
There we go.
There you go.
I'll just very briefly tell you who Little Dot Sport are, so that you kind of understand why we're talking about vertical video and why it's important in our world. We are a social media content creation and distribution agency. So effectively, we create a lot of video and graphics and general copy content for social media platforms. We do that on behalf of sports rights holders, so generally federations, clubs, or broadcasters. And then we distribute that video on those social media platforms and try to build audiences through them and try to create commercial return on investment from them. So we work with the likes of, as you can probably see from this reel playing in the background, we work with the likes of the English FA across England national team, social channels, the FA Cup, the Women's Super League. We work with West Ham, we work with DAZN. We've got a really wide range of absolutely excellent rights holders who we help to grow on all platforms. And our heritage was YouTube, so that's kind of where the video side of things comes from. But social and social video has evolved drastically since 10 or so years ago, and now it's central to every single social algorithm, and that's why it's kind of we've expanded our remit onto some of those other platforms. And I guess the reason I wanted to talk about vertical today was that I find myself over the last 3 or 4 years talking more and more with our partners about vertical video and vertical video strategies. And there came a point where I wondered, you know, why bother having a vertical video strategy? Surely a vertical video strategy is a video strategy. There's no difference between vertical or portrait 16:9 traditional video. And as I thought about it a bit more, I realized that actually vertical has actually become more of a byword for a trend that is emerging, or has really emerged over the last few years, which is full screen portrait videos in an infinite scroll, often highly meme-oriented, that younger consumers generally, and we'll come on to it, younger consumers are consuming at great volume. And just to prove that point of that growth over the last few years of how dominant this has become as a video format, the graphs that we have here show the growth of vertical video platforms. So you can see the growth of TikTok, which is the black line on the left-hand side of the screen. So 5 years ago, it started to go toe-to-toe with YouTube and Facebook in terms of video views. It has completely dwarfed them in the last few years. And now, actually, YouTube, as it has invested itself in short-form video, has started to be able to compete again with that as a platform. And when you look at YouTube...
Sorry, Robbie, just to explain the graph a bit, I don't want to interrupt you, but am I reading it right? Is that 60 billion daily video views?
60 billion daily video views on
and
TikTok.
YouTube is at about 35 or so, and Facebook still, yeah, we all think Facebook is dead, but Facebook at 20 billion daily video views, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this data comes from public-facing data. YouTube themselves say that they have 50 billion views a day on Shorts alone. So actually, we think that number could be much, much higher. But yeah, it's colossal scale of video viewing. And you can see just how important TikTok has become in a very short space of time. And just to prove that point on YouTube and the fact that Shorts has really helped it to recover, we did some analysis across all of the channels that we run on YouTube, and we saw that now nearly 50% of all views on YouTube are short-form video views. So that's very quickly become a dominant, if not the dominant form or mode of consuming content on that platform.
Which is an incredible number, again, when the amount of time that we think that we spend on YouTube, and they say 50% of that time is doing this doom scrolling thing, is an incredible thing. Do you have another slide on this?
This is kind of to prove the point around younger audiences,
right,
as we mentioned. So I think everyone would acknowledge that TikTok is a younger skewing platform, and that bears out in the data that we've seen globally. The amount of time spent for teens on TikTok dwarfs, it's more than Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter combined. So it's absolutely huge in terms of daily activity, and that's grown rapidly over the last 3 years. But we're seeing where we get a kind of direct comparison between more traditional social video and this new vertical video format on YouTube. We've seen that vertical video skews very young as well. So 70% of all Shorts views are from 18 to 34, whereas actual regular videos, that number is 48%.
Right.
So in terms of a youth skewing strategy, this is a really important platform. But also, I think we all agree and notice that generally younger viewership behaviors tend to point the way to the dominant trends for years to come. As it did when Facebook first launched, it was a young audience that adopted it first. This is going to be and become the dominant video viewing trend of the next 10 years.
Going to be or already is?
Already is.
We can make that argument. For anybody who's just joined us, I think be taking notes or ask Robbie to send you these slides, because I feel like they could make their way into any presentation that anybody's creating about convincing arguments about YouTube or the importance of Shorts. I want to stay on the one on the right about the growth by year, because also this is important to dissect by age and geography as well. Because some of these platforms are more location-specific. TikTok trends very highly in the US, for example, not so much in Europe. Do you find that as well? At some platforms, Snapchat is another good example. Some platforms work better in certain markets versus others?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely well worth factoring into any strategy is what your target markets are. Yep. TikTok is banned in India. Therefore, reaching Indian audiences on TikTok is hopeless. Yep. YouTube Shorts is incredibly popular in India as a result. Snapchat, like you say, very dominantly US skewing. And so if you want to reach a US dominant audience, particularly a younger audience, then Snapchat should feature as part of your strategy.
And quick word on Facebook, because again, I certainly thought, and we all think that Facebook is not a platform that anybody touches anymore, but it is clearly relevant. So who is it relevant for?
We're definitely seeing that the age demographic there skews much older.
Right.
But I completely agree that it gets ignored far too quickly because of that fact. It still has 3 billion, nearly 3 billion monthly active users, so almost half the population of the planet using Facebook, and it has huge penetration. It's almost the front page of the internet in certain Asian markets, so it's not one to discount by any means, and they are equally investing in vertical video and starting to make that one of the dominant forms of video on the platform. So really, really important platform to consider overall.
Doing my job for me, Robbie, take us away. We're going to segment the platforms, what is important or what is, let's say, the key differentiators between each of those. So walk us through that a bit, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk in a bit more depth about Instagram and YouTube and TikTok, which are, I think, probably the most important platforms at the moment when it comes to vertical video strategies. But I thought it was useful just to show where each of those platforms are at in terms of vertical video, and really reiterate the point, vertical video is absolutely entrenched as a trend. On Instagram, they publicly have stated that Reels is the greatest contributor to engagement on the platform. So in terms of building a fan base where engaging an audience is incredibly important, Reels has to feature as a major part of that strategy. And we tend to have a kind of a balance of posting on YouTube, on Instagram of 50% video, 50% other media. On YouTube, as we saw earlier, it's 50% of all YouTube views effectively, but they're also really investing in attracting creators into the Shorts environment, and they're doing that through a monetization fund. So they're trying to entice creators, as they have done in the past very successfully, entice creators into the ecosystem by rewarding them with monetization opportunities. That's not the case on TikTok yet. And so I guess the play from YouTube is, can we draw in some of those creators that have previously published primarily on TikTok into our ecosystem and try to own that creator space? TikTok, I won't spend too much time on here other than to say, just to reiterate, the colossal scale of TikTok, 1 billion active users, and that's come in a very short space of time compared with other video platforms, other social platforms that have been around a lot longer. And then just a word on Snapchat and Facebook, which I won't go into in too much detail, because I think they're slightly different. Snapchat has a huge number of daily active users. I think it may even be greater in terms of daily active users than Twitter, and yet often kind of gets pushed down the priority list because it's less well understood, and probably because it's more geo-specific, as we said. Very strong penetration in the US and in India, and really strong penetration among young audiences, and often young female audiences as well. The reason why I think it's slightly different is that it's predominantly a messaging app still. So actually...
Snapchat?
Snapchat, yeah. So actually a lot of those users are using it to message each other as a lot of other people use WhatsApp.
Yeah, Snap Me or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Quick show of hands. How many people here have a TikTok account? Or actively using TikTok? A strong number. Snapchat? A couple, yeah. It's one of those, both of those platforms don't get a lot of coverage in Europe. But again, as you said, for rights holders or any sort of business that's looking to generate visibility in the markets that you mentioned, whether it's the US or in certain markets in Asia, both those platforms become very relevant. And Facebook, an older audience. Now let's talk about what on each platform, right? Because now, okay, video is important across all. Gone are the days of, hey, Instagram is where we post images, and YouTube is where we post videos, and TikTok is, we do vertical videos. You do vertical video everywhere. LinkedIn does vertical video now, or they experimented with it a bit. But there is still a difference between what kind of content is relevant on each. What should be a reel versus what should be a story versus what should be a short. Walk us through your understanding of what drives that change or that difference.
Yeah, so I'll start with Shorts. We've done, YouTube has incredibly rich data, which we spend a lot of time mining and trying to glean insights from. And we've done a lot of work recently trying to understand what works when it comes to YouTube Shorts. And we found out a few key things. The first is around video length, and I guess how video length relates to engagement, so actual watch times. And we found that videos that are slightly longer tend to perform better in terms of average views than videos that are shorter.
When you say longer, because it's still capped by 59 seconds, right? So
correct.
If you're skewing to 55 versus 35, it gets consumed more?
Yeah, that's correct. But there is a nuance to that in that the key driver, the key algorithmic signal seems to be, can you get people past 30 seconds of watch time? Okay. So we did some analysis, and we saw a graph when we grouped into buckets of different watch time lengths, that there was this huge jump from people watching between 20 and 30 seconds to those watching 30 seconds plus. So it's clearly an algorithmic signal, and that means that if your video is 60 seconds in length, but you lose people after 10 seconds, it doesn't matter. You're still not gaining the benefit of that algorithmic bias. But if your video is 10 seconds and you're getting people to watch it 3 times over because it has something slightly strange that happens in it, or it's one of those videos that you just can't quite understand what's going on, and so you watch it over and over again, then actually that's better than a longer form video. So the really key thing is to think about the length of video as it relates to getting 30 seconds of watch time.
Interesting. So that's like the hump you have to get over. Make sure that you almost top load the video, that first 20, 30 seconds is the premium part of your own content, and hopefully the rest of it skews that way. Anything else that we can take away? 2 times the engagement rate, 5 times better at winning new subscribers, which is important as well, because that's what you're looking for.
I think the one, if I were to typify the perfect YouTube short, it would be a clip of match action that maybe didn't really feature any text or subtitles, that could be watched at any point between now and 5, 10 years' time, and that actually probably looks quite a lot like those viral UGC YouTube videos that would crop up in your feed 10 or so years ago. It's that kind of style of video that's doing really, really well on YouTube Shorts, and that's actually quite different to some of the other platforms. It's not meme-oriented, it's not music focused, it doesn't need to work without sound necessarily, it doesn't need to have subtitles. It's really the premium match action or little skills or little clips that you might not have seen otherwise that tend to perform the best and get the greatest reach.
So something a bit more dynamic, it sounds like. It's not just you sitting in a chair with the camera pointed at you, but with a bit more action. I find that the point of the right, shorts without text and subtitles perform better. That's a bit of a surprise, because I feel like that's the default now. If you watch movies and shows, everything with subtitles, but you're saying on YouTube, maybe go without subtitles?
Yeah, I think it's not as important, and part of this is because of that dominance of match footage. So rather than it being a trend that you're jumping off the back of with a player front and center, an original piece of video that you've had to go and capture for YouTube Shorts, you can actually use what's already in your archive, what you already have at your disposal, which is, from the point of view of resource deployment, a lot easier. You're not having to go and set up specific YouTube Shorts shoots.
Perfect. Okay, we've covered YouTube a bit. Let's get on to TikTok.
I guess TikTok is almost the opposite. So this example here, I may be able to play it. Am I able to play it? Yeah. So this example here is Ben Chilwell, defender for Chelsea, doing a piece of branded content, so a piece of content for Trivago, in which he is jumping off the back of a trending sound and doing a tour of his team bus. And the reason why this is great and why it's perfect for TikTok is it has an athlete front and center, so personality content works much, much better. It's jumping on the back of a trend and a trending sound, and that's helping with searchability, but also with the community aspect of TikTok, where people really appreciate trends that are taking place within the community and other creators jumping in and giving their own version of it. And it grabs your attention instantly. So the moment it starts, the sound is in, it's using the in-app effects and text options that TikTok provides to explain what's happening, and you're immediately drawn in as a result and want to kind of watch the whole thing and maybe even watch it multiple times over.
So here, again, would it be, so the music is important. I think that's a big thing that everybody wants to jump on. There is a trending track at any point in time, or maybe 5 or 10 of those, and you want to jump on those. So piggyback on trends authentically, which is important. Make sure that you're doing it in a way that is resonates with you and then your audience. Using the effects and text options. So here, maybe subtitles is more relevant than on YouTube. Is that what you're saying as well?
Yeah, ideally using the in-app means of doing that.
Right.
So you don't have to burn it in an edit. You can use the in-app features to do it. And that's partly because the community then see it as much more native to the platform, and partly just because they're designed in such a way that they work better on that app.
Fair. All right. So that covers TikTok a bit. I think we go to Reels next.
Yeah, that's right. And Reels, I think the interesting thing about Reels is how it reflects the heritage of Instagram as this very aesthetic platform, almost like a portfolio of photography it used to be. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we see some of these unique angles and unique styles of content performing particularly well on Instagram. So that might be a pitch side camera, it might be a POV GoPro shot, it might be some drone footage, something that gives you a different angle to the one that you might expect from a broadcast TV camera, tends to perform really, really well. A lot of people use Instagram without sound, and so this is where captions and subtitles are really important to contextualize what you're showing people. And that's one of the things that we find on this platform. It is really an absolute must. This example here of Aaron Ramsdale, it tells you straight up what you're about to see, what you're watching, gives you the context, and also it reflects that unique angle point that I just made as well.
You cover over here frequency, which we haven't touched upon yet, so let's get into that. Frequency of posting. It mentions here post at least once per day, but don't overpost. I don't know what overpost beyond once a day is, but is that relevant for the other platforms as well? Is, like for example, we post vertical content once a week. That's clearly not good enough. Clearly not good enough. We obviously don't understand the platforms well enough. But once a day is the same across all platforms, do you find?
It's actually pretty much the same. I think the reason I've called it out here is on Reels, there were ever greater returns the more that you fed the algorithm 3 or so years ago, and that's not the case anymore. So there are diminishing returns from increasing volume. So that might work up to a point. If you go to twice a day, overall you may get greater reach, but on average, per reel, you're going to get fewer views and fewer engagements overall. And so there's a middle ground, and I think there's a balance to strike between an overinvestment that is just watering down the power of your content and actually trying to make sure that you're favoring quality over quantity.
So how do I A/B test that? If I'm looking at an audience, say, for example, let's take our own use case. I didn't do a good enough introduction at the start, but if anybody wants to check out latest trends on sports innovation, come to Sports Tech X. You might scroll through, find some shorts to go through. But we're posting once a week where we do top news in sports tech, like what are the top deals, who's invested in what, which sports rights holder has launched an innovation program, something of that sort. How do I A/B test to understand my own, like what is my optimum frequency, time of day of posting, all these kind of things? Should I, as you said, post a lot and then step back, or are they already like, hey, these are the premium or the best practices across the platforms? How do I learn that?
You can test and learn. Mm-hmm. There are no in-app features for you to be able to do that. So the analytics from Reels are frankly very poor. And so actually, hopefully we've done a lot of the hard work for you, and we can sort of say or advise and recommend on that kind of thing. So frequency being roughly once a day, the time of day that you're posting being the prime time for your main audience. So in the UK, that would probably be around 4 or 5 p.m. as people are starting to log off from work. So I think realistically, you do have to test and learn if you're on your own. And there's no hard and fast data that's going to enable you to do that. You need to kind of do that yourself. But there are some established principles that we've discovered over the last couple of years that certainly help with that kind of thing.
So test and learn is a short answer, but for more details, contact Robbie.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the other version. All right, let's look at, but creating content for each of the platforms. I think that's where we go next, right? So how much of your archive can you use to reformat across different platforms versus how much original content are you creating for this format? So walk us through this, please.
So I wanted to acknowledge the difficulty when it comes to saying create a vertical video strategy and make it bespoke for every single platform. And that then has to sit alongside your 16:9 strategy, your web and app strategy, has to sit alongside your Twitter strategy. Mm-hmm. All of these things create huge demands on resource that are sometimes unsustainable and just aren't possible for every single rights holder. Now, obviously, the more hands, the better. The more you can put into this, the more that you get back. However, I think there are tips and tricks that help to streamline the workflow that make it easier. So, for example, you have a lot of, most clubs or broadcasters or rights holders will have a lot of footage, whether it's from current matches or from the archive. And there are lots of ways that you can use that in relatively low-lift ways to create content for these vertical platforms. So when it comes to reformatting, one of the things that is often a difficulty is making a 16:9 video appropriate for vertical. Mm-hmm. And this example that we have from La Liga is a great example of that, right? So what's happening is the ball is moving so fast that when the editor is keyframing that image so that the ball stays central, there's a lot of jarring going on. Now, what La Liga have done absolutely excellently here is to add graphics to it, mm-hmm. and to actually do some sort of ball tracking to make that much, much less jarring. So it's a really low-lift trick in order to make that content work for vertical. And the other example on the right-hand side, which you will have just seen play, is an example where actually they've not opted to use the wide angle so much as the close-up, and that's another great tip in terms of reformatting match footage for vertical, is the close-ups tend to work better because you have much less motion of the ball outside of that central frame.
Mm-hmm. So understanding how to repurpose your own existing content, I think the best, let's say, grandma rule is how would you like to view it? If it looks good to you, then probably looks good for everyone else. All right, so we've got using existing content, and now we're going to talk about, I think, original content?
Yeah, original content. These are just some examples of our producers on location with Man City and with Arsenal and with the NFL there in the middle. So when it comes to creating original content for TikTok, we would always recommend sending a vertical video producer, a dedicated vertical video producer, to any shoot. And the reason for that is that often in between other shots that might be required for other types of video, the vertical video producer can step in with their phone. There's very little setup time when it comes to shooting on a mobile phone. Mm-hmm. They can step in and capture exactly what they need in a very short space of time. And that's absolutely essential when it comes to maximizing the use of these player windows. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you only get 10 minutes with a player. Now, if you're using 8 minutes of that to shoot your long-form video, if someone can just jump in here and there and grab what they need for vertical, then all of a sudden you've doubled the output from that shoot. So we always try and send a dedicated vertical video producer along. The other reason that it's so important to have a dedicated vertical video producer is that they will understand inherently the trends of the platform, what works, and what they need to capture on that phone. And the great thing is, most players that we work with are using TikTok anyway. They're using it, and they've seen the trend already, so they understand what's required. So all it takes is a little bit of show and tell, a demonstration of what's required, and then, great, can you do that for us now? And often you get absolutely brilliant content off the back of that.
Another important thing to understand there is that, as you said, out of 10 minutes, you might spend 8 minutes on your normal shoot and only a couple minutes in the other one. But going back to the earlier slide, 50% of the videos are consumed in that short format. So that 2% or 20% of the time that you're spending, or that 2 minutes, can create a significantly higher output than the majority of the time that you spend on the original content. Okay, so creating, and also, by the way, another job title that we've created, a vertical video producer.
Yeah.
Anybody looking out for a new profile, a new career to launch, vertical video producer is the one. All right, so we've got another one here, I think.
Yeah, and this, I think, probably speaks to your point, which is if you have 50% of your viewership coming from vertical video, the temptation can be to say, well, I'll focus 50% of my resources on social video, and you end up overproducing.
Right.
So you send a 10-person crew along to a shoot when actually what you need is one person with a mobile phone, and you're going to get better content from that, more authentic content from it. And so one thing I would always recommend is staying lo-fi. There's nothing that beats a presenter with a phone in their hand, filming themselves, self-shooting like this when it comes to the aesthetic of this content going out on a platform. Collaborate with people who know how to do this and can do it really, really well. Mm-hmm. So influencers already working on the platform will generally be better at producing this content than a 10-person traditional TV crew. And if you are going down that route of creating more premium content, maybe because it's branded content, like in this enterprise example here with Michael Ballack, then make sure that you shoot in the right format. So we always recommend shooting in 4K, so that when an editor crops and punches in, the quality remains. And we always recommend ensuring that you almost have an overlay over your camera that makes sure that you're center framing on the player so that you acknowledge that that video is going to be used for vertical as well as for a widescreen format.
Focus on the key point of action, but also appreciate the go lo-fi, because it's one of those where there is an authenticity to these roughly produced vertical videos, which is, I don't know, you talking while eating or running, or they just make them a bit more watchable. It's weird, but they are. So high production is not necessary. You just need to know somebody who knows what they're doing and to produce that vertical video, and that content can blow up much more than a highly produced piece of content.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Exactly right.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's talk about where we're headed. Yeah, we're going to leave a contact slide up there, and you can get in touch with Robbie and Lil Dot. But where does this all headed? Let's talk about what the future of vertical content looks like across different platforms. Is it just going to be everywhere? Is that what it is now, and we're all doomed to doom scroll?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks.
I do think that this is going to become the dominant social video format.
Right.
I don't think that traditional horizontal video is going to disappear, and particularly YouTube will continue to have a balance between both. But I do think it will become the dominant video habit. And I think we all saw it when everyone started consuming video on phones several years ago. We were saying, why are we consuming a 16:9 video and missing out on these two big blocks of space on the phone? It just makes sense to have a portrait video if you're watching on your mobile phone.
Yep.
And so as a result, I do think it is going to become the dominant form. I wonder whether actually it will shift towards longer form video, and I think that tends to be a trend, and that's often driven by advertisers. So platforms like YouTube and Facebook know that they can get more money from advertisers if they're inputting mid-rolls, which come only when your content is long enough to insert a mid-roll into it. Mm-hmm. And so there may well be a push from them to go into more long-form content beyond that 1 minute mark. And we're already seeing that on TikTok and already seeing it on Reels as well.
Perfect. We have maybe time for one or two more questions. I picked up something from the community who had sent in questions. Let's talk quickly about AI and the role that it'll play. We have to go, let's say, a bit trendy with keeping the vertical video format authentic. How important a role is AI or generative AI in creating or repurposing existing content into vertical video content?
We're finding it really useful from the point of view of the resource management point. So we use a lot with our partners a platform called WSC Sports, which many people will be familiar with, cloud-based, but it uses AI and intelligent information in order to be able to clip and crop videos automatically for you. So it takes a huge amount of the lift out of the content production process. So that's fantastic. I think as much as AI, it will also, I think we'll also start to see things like VR start to get integrated into, or maybe not so much VR as like
immersive experiences, or augmented reality, whichever you want, mixed reality, whichever you want to call it.
We're kind of seeing it on Snapchat already with some of the filters and the profiles that you can have, and the overlays that you can have.
Meta is doing something right now with the Rugby World Cup. I mean, every sports right holder, every tech platform combined with the sports right holder is playing with this immersive reality, including the vertical video format, yeah.
Exactly, and I think that's more exciting from an advertiser point of view than a mid-roll, and I'd love to see more creative formats developed around those kind of overlays and immersive experience for advertisers that encourage that kind of ad spend over some of the mid-roll ad spend.
Perfect. Robbie, it's been superbly informative. I know I've learned something, and we maybe take a little consultative piece offline. I'll ask you for a free hour or something. For anybody who needs to get in touch, Robbie and Lil Dot Studios are based in London, is it?
Based in London, offices in Germany, in LA, in Sydney as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. Always happy to share more information.
So you guys get around. So for anybody who needs a bit more information about how you can improve your vertical video content profile or platform, or let's say distribution, whatever it is, get in touch with Robbie. For information on innovation in sports, what's new and what's trending, you can come to our Sports Tech X. We're based in Berlin. 30 seconds, Robbie. I have to ask you my last and favorite question to ask. I like to believe that we're all sports fans first. So what has been your favorite sporting moment?
I guess I grew up in the 90s and in the UK and in rural Gloucestershire, which is not very near any football clubs. And so by default, I was a Manchester United fan.
Oh, okay.
I guess
I didn't
also,
know that. I'm a Man United fan as well.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Well, I guess ahead of Munich tonight.
Not a good time to be a United fan, let's just say that, yeah. I don't know about the audience.
Let's say 1999, that those last 5 minutes of the Champions League final in the Nou Camp.
We'll always hold on to that. Robbie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you then.
Thank you, guys.